Tonight on News 5 Live, Belize's COVID-19 cases increased to 7, including 2 more from the west. Cayo resident and city council employee Hubert Pipersburg loses his battle to the deadly disease. His wife points to shortcomings in the healthcare system. Cayo is now on lockdown as a containment measure. Belize City Mayor Bernard Wagner remains in isolation even after testing negative for COVID-19. We'll show you how scores of Belize City residents gathered outside the courthouse after over 400 persons countrywide have been slapped with charges associated with the state of emergency and curfew. And the police department has launched an internal investigation after a man is shot and a 77-year-old is beaten up in Belmopan as cops tried to enforce the curfew over the weekend. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
In life, there's always two sides to
Good evening. Welcome to News 5 Live for Monday, April 6th. I am Marlene Cuellar. There are 7 known cases of COVID-19 in Belize, and the first Belizean to die from the virus is 55-year-old Hubert Pipersberg, who passed away on Sunday at the isolation unit of the KHMH. The San Ignacio resident tested positive on Friday, April 3rd. Pipersberg was experiencing fever, a mild cough, and difficulty breathing 5 days before he was tested, and after visiting 2 medical facilities in San Ignacio. He was then placed in an isolated area within the Western Regional Hospital compound. Later that evening, his health began to deteriorate quickly. Suffering from respiratory distress and pneumonia, Pipersberg was then transferred to the isolation unit at the Carl Houston Memorial Hospital, where his battle against the virus intensified. He took his dying breath on Sunday, and following his passing, Prime Minister Dean Barrow issued a sympathy message in which he says that the medical staff did everything they could to save patient 4.
It is my sad duty to announce the death this afternoon of the 4th patient to be diagnosed in Belize with COVID-19. On behalf of the entire nation, I offer deepest condolences to the wife and family of Hubert Pipersberg. He was a well-known, indeed renowned Belizean who served his country both at home and in the diaspora. Mr. Pipersberg was diagnosed in San Ignacio early on Friday last and was transferred to the KHMH that same evening. He was then intubated and appeared stable until today, when he deteriorated sharply. He died despite what I am assured were Herculean efforts on the part of the medical staff to save him.
While Prime Minister Barrow says that the Herculean efforts were done to attempt to save him, Pipersberg's wife says otherwise. In an emotional Facebook post, Maria Recinos shared her family's ordeal when they desperately sought medical attention for Pipersberg. Recinos concludes that based on her experience, Belize is not ready to handle this pandemic. The wife details the chain of events beginning on March 21st when Pipersberg first began showing signs and symptoms. She says that on that day, Pipersberg began experiencing a sore throat and dry cough. 5 days after, he began suffering from a fever as high as 103 degrees. He also began having difficulty breathing, all symptoms of the virus. 6 days later, on March 27th, Racina says that Pipersberg's condition was not improving, and as such, she decided to contact Dr. Marvin Manzanero. After several questions, Racines was told that Pipersberg did not qualify to be tested. On March 29th, Pipersberg was taken to La Loma Luz Hospital in San Ignacio. The doctors there gave him medication for fever and respiratory issues. The following day, Pipersberg was taken to Godoy's clinic, where tests were done and he was sent home. On March 31st, Pipersberg's condition worsened. Racina says that he was in a crisis. He was later taken to the Western Regional Hospital where, according to Racinos, no one wanted to treat him since they suspected that he had the virus. He was finally tested and left in an area within the hospital's compound. Racino says that on April 1st, they spent the day in the same situation without information and care. She said she had to call Health Minister Pablo Marin to get information, and it was on April 3rd that Dr. Manzanero contacted her, telling her that the result was positive. Racino writes, quote, "Throughout the entire morning, we were treated with great indifference and little care by the personnel of the hospital. They saw us as delinquents, and my husband stopped receiving any attention with relation to his sickness. That entire morning, no one did anything for the health of my husband. I pressured my contacts for him to be transferred to Belize City. And thanks to Dr. Dalgo, he was finally moved to intensive care at the KHMH, and he arrived already in a critical state," unquote. On Saturday, Pipersburg fought against the disease, and on Sunday, he died. The government says that an investigation of the public health response and medical care given to Pipersburg, as recounted by Racinos, has already begun. GOB says that the criticism and complaints, as recounted by Racinos, are taken seriously.
Mr. Pipersburg's death is an occasion for mourning. It is also a reminder, coming to us in the worst possible way, of the need for all Belizeans to treat this terrible virus with the grave seriousness it deserves. No one need doubt that such a reminder is necessary. Every day since the declaration of the state of emergency, the police have had to arrest scores of persons for breaking curfew and breaching the stay-at-home and social distancing regulations. The social media pictures of people piled almost on top of one another at the Michael Finnegan Market in Belize City yesterday are further and shocking proof of our heedlessness. I can only hope and plea that the tragic death of Mr. Pipersburg and the announcement early this morning of COVID-19's 5th confirmed case in Belize will cause the fundamental change in behavior that is a must if we are to defeat the pandemic. Of course, the Ministry of Health continues to work tirelessly to combat the spread of the virus. Very quickly after his diagnosis, close contacts of Mr. Pipersburg, both in San Ignacio and Belize City, where he worked, were swabbed and tested. That number amounted to 49. Additionally, 41 healthcare providers from the 3 medical facilities he visited were also tested. Thankfully, all tests have come back negative.
On Sunday, Belize confirmed its 5th COVID-19 case. Patient 5 is a Belizean student who returned from the USA via Mexico and remains in strict quarantine. The student arrived in Belize on Friday, April 3rd, and as we said, is at a quarantine facility. He is without symptoms and stable.
The ministry has also placed patient number 5, a Belizean that a couple of days ago came back from the US via Mexico, in strict quarantine. This was done in Curacao immediately upon his entry into the country, thus minimizing the possibility of any transmission from that patient. The point of rehearsing all this Ministry of Health activity is to reassure Belizeans. Tireless work is being done on the medical front, and there is no need to panic. The front line of the Ministry of Health has been strengthened by the recently arrived Cuban Medical Brigade, and I have directed the drafting of a number of non-government medical personnel, both doctors and nurses, to join an advisory, planning and coping unit to assist the Director of Health Services and his team. The National Oversight Committee meets virtually tomorrow, and the same modality will now serve for cabinet meetings. In that context, I expect an urgent analysis of the current medical situation and consideration of any further measures that may be necessary.
According to the Prime Minister, more test kits, ventilators, and other gear have been received. Belize has confirmed 7 cases of the novel coronavirus so far. 268 persons have been tested. Patient 4, 55-year-old Hubert Pipersburg, died from the virus on Sunday while in the isolation unit at the Carl Hitchner Memorial Hospital. The 2 new cases are both males and are also from San Ignacio. Patient 6 had contact with Pipersburg and developed minor signs and symptoms that included diarrhea and a loss of sense of smell. This patient does not require medication and remains in self-isolation at his residence in San Ignacio. The 7th case, however, is hospitalized at the Western Regional Hospital. Not much information is shared of patient 7, but according to the Ministry of Health, a mapping exercises are currently underway for both cases. Late this afternoon, the Prime Minister released a recorded statement after today's meeting of the National Oversight Committee. PM Barrow announced new measures. The first is that the entire Cayo District will be placed under quarantine. The Cayo District has recorded 3 of the 7 COVID-19 cases. Buses will no longer run to and from the Cayo District, and movements within the district will be further restricted as a containment measure, similar to San Pedro, where only 2 cases of the COVID-19 have been detected. The stringent quarantine measures will also include shorter working hours and opening time for those businesses which are allowed to operate during the state of emergency. Those measures also apply to businesses around the country.
For the protection of the public, the entire Cayo District must now be placed under quarantine. During this period of an enhanced lockdown for Cayo, random testing will be greatly expanded throughout the district. Everybody tells us that the way to slow, if not completely halt, the spread of the virus is to do as much testing as possible. We do have, for the moment, an adequate supply of kits, and we're trying to get more. So during the period of this lockdown, let me repeat, the Ministry of Health will do greatly increased surveillance and random testing to try to get a handle on this thing, particularly in the first instance in the Cayo District, because of the fact of the 3 cases having come from there. Of course, no lockdown can be entirely without exceptions, certain obvious exceptions. In the case of Cayo, though, the exceptions have to be severely limited. Accordingly, people in Cayo will be strictly confined to the following activities: procuring food and medicine, procuring fuel and finance. Thus, grocery shops and pharmacies will be open but during reduced hours. Fuel stations will also operate during reduced hours, and banks, credit unions, and other lending institutions, they will only be able to operate between the hours of 8 a.m. and 12 noon. Naturally, bus transportation to and from the Cayo District will cease altogether.
The National Oversight Committee took additional measures with respect to the rest of the country. Hardware stores that were allowed to keep their doors open in the first list are now only to offer delivery services.
The lists of approved businesses will continue in effect, but there are some changes to the working hours, the prescribed hours of those businesses. Before I speak to those changes, which are relatively minor, I should perhaps say, though, that in terms of the new regime to govern Belize City, one particular approved activity has been taken off that list of approved businesses entirely and must now cease operations. And I'm talking about construction and construction sites, private and commercial. They must now be closed in accordance with the decision taken today by the National Oversight Committee. They must now be closed for the next 14 days in the first instance. But continuing on, bakeries and tortilla factories, always those were businesses naturally that had to be allowed to remain open. Their opening hours, though, will now change. They will go from 5 a.m. to 4 p.m.
The Belize City Council, the Belize Territorial Volunteers, and many others are mourning the passing of Hubert Pipersberg, the first casualty of COVID-19 in the country. The 55-year-old returned to Belize several years ago after living in the United States for quite some time. Upon his return, Pipersberg became active in the socio-political discourse before landing a job at City Hall with the Wagner administration. There he first served in the capacity of communications manager and liaised with the media on a number of occasions. He was also a close friend of Mayor Bernard Wagner, having attended primary school with him at Queen Square Anglican. We spoke with Mayor Wagner earlier, who is still taken aback by the tragic passing of his colleague.
I think we have really come to grips with the passing of Hugh. He was a very happy, engaging, high IQ guy, charismatic. Got along with almost everyone, right? For the most part, it was the voice of our diaspora brothers and sisters, right? Pipe really wanted to come back and serve his country and serve his city. And that is why he returned to Belize to help Belize City. And like he always used to tell me, he said, "Mayor, we need to work on turning Belize City into a modern city." And that is what we have been doing for the past 2 years together. Still have a lot of questions. We didn't know that this would have happened. To one of our close friends, personally to me, he's a very close friend. We went to school together, Queen Square School. I still grappling with it as we speak.
What message or what words would you have for your city council at this point in time? A lot of you guys were in contact with him. A lot of you guys befriended him over the time you worked together. What word of either consolation or a word of advice, perhaps, would you share with all the employees of the Belize City Council?
I want to reassure staff that Hugh, we want to learn from Hugh, right? We can't have his demise and just happen and we don't learn from him. We have to practice the protocols as set out, and the social distancing, the isolation, comply with the state of emergency, comply with the curfew hours, practice good hygiene.
Mayor Bernard Wagner is among a group of employees at City Hall who have been isolating at home after being swabbed over the weekend. They remain in mandatory isolation after having interacted with Pipersberg as late as March 23rd, despite testing negative for COVID-19. According to the mayor, it is important for staff to remain quarantined for the safety of their respective families and others, notwithstanding the results of the screening they've undertaken.
Testing for most of the primary contacts that interacted with Hugh. Our last contact with him was on the 23rd of March. And so Friday we did a mapping. We did a list for all those staff, and we got swabbed Friday, Saturday, Sunday as well, and even up to today. Those secondary personnel are being swabbed. The key personnel that swabbed on Friday was those that worked on the third floor, most of the staff on the third floor, myself including the city administrator, and we all came back negative on Sunday, but we still can't take things for granted. The COVID is our new reality, and we can't take it for granted. We still have to ensure that we quarantine ourselves for a number of days, 14 days, and make sure that we implore those that got the negative results to ensure that we keep ourselves quarantined to protect our families at all times.
The Minister of Health, Pablo Marin, also posted that he was in isolation after his tests were negative. Marin had been at the Western Regional Hospital where Pipersburg was admitted. Coming up, over 400 persons are charged for violating the state of emergency and curfew regulations. Did cops take the enforcement of the curfew law too far on Friday night in Belmopan? That's what many have concluded after video and photos of an elderly man being beaten by police surfaced online. The officers were reportedly patrolling the streets in the San Martin area when they pursued two persons on the streets after 8 p.m. The cops reportedly said that the persons ran into an elderly man's yard, and that is when they went looking for them. That visit ended in one man hospitalized, 3 arrested, and the elderly man beaten up. But that's not all. Residents in the area claim that the officers were firing shots indiscriminately on the street that night. Now, there is an internal investigation into the matter, and here's this story with Andrea Polanco.
This cell phone footage shows police officers repeatedly hitting and kicking 2 men on the ground. It happened on Uruguay Street in the San Martin area of Belmopan on Friday night. While this footage captured only a snippet of the mayhem that ensued in a yard, at the end of it, 1 person was shot and now hospitalized. 4 others were beaten up, including 77-year-old Alejandro Chavez. 3 of those young men were arrested. Senior citizen Chavez operates Don Chindo's apartments, where more than 20 persons live. But he says that they weren't breaking any laws and still trying to understand why police stormed his place. On Saturday afternoon, Chavez was in pain and had to be supported to walk as he returned from a doctor's visit. Pictures taken shortly after the beatdown show a swelling of the neck area, injuries to the arms and midsection. The medical report obtained on Saturday outlines areas of localized swellings filled with blood, as well as mild bruise of the lungs, consistent with blunt force trauma. He recounts that he was going to open the gate, but before he was able to do so, more than 5 heavily armed cops wearing masks burst through his gate, kicked him over, and beat him up.
Ellos estaban pateando la puerta y yo les dije que les iba a abrir.
When he heard that was kicking the gate,
Entonces cuando yo salí allí, ellos abrieron la puerta y entonces me pegaron la patada y me aventaron por ahí.
When he was heading towards the gate to open, to unlock it, make them come in, and then broke the lock, and then when he started to kick him, that was the first kick where they gave him, and then drop him over there, and direct then started to kick him up.
Uno me aventó primero, el otro que me pegó la patada, me pegó la primera aquí. Entonces regresó, el otro le dijo no lo pateaste.
The one come and he push and he kick him when he drop, and the other one come over and he kick him again. Then the other one come again and try continue kick him, but the little just left him. The other one tell just left it, make you go to the other ones. So then pick the other and start to beat about 2 of them that was there, he says, and then go to the back room and go take the other 2 guys from there and beat them up. From them, she said, and take them up from here and then carry them down the street.
At any point, did your dad try to resist arrest or fight back with these police?
No, because he said that when slam against there and he dropped, he only hold up himself, down, and then just kick him up. If you realize he have bruise on his arm, on his neck, and on his rib side. Well, this is the one that is paining him a little bit more. Beating an elderly man like him is like you're beating a 5-6-year-old kid. So, I mean, why are you going to put yourself to an old man? And worse, kicking him with your foot. I mean, your foot is stronger than your hand. So then knock him there, then throw him there, and then kick him there.
The tenants of the property say that some of the police officers pointed guns at them and forced them to go inside and lock their doors. They report hearing several shots fired, some of which hit 29-year-old Gustavo Pivaral. He was shot in the hand and abdomen and had to do surgery as a result. Pivaral doesn't live at the residence but spends a lot of time there. Mike Chavez says that the attack on the property was unwarranted.
What I understand, there were some couple guys there, the 3 guys that live here and the other one that live there. One of them was shot. He was sitting down on a bench there, and then said the officer just pull the thing and just pop the shot at them. It was like some rubber bullets. I mean, the guy didn't even was moving at all, and then came it's pretty weird the way when they come in, right?
Vilma Pivaral lives 3 houses away. Her brother, Gustavo, was shot, and her son, 23-year-old David Na, was also beaten up and arrested. Pivaral says that just after 8:30 that night, she saw 2 boys riding on the street. Shortly after, she heard gunshots. She says after that, an officer walked down the street and fired several shots for no apparent reason. The cops were in the area 2 times before they burst into Chavez's residence.
Never take so long when I heard the first shot. And I said, oh my goodness, a police shot. And a little while later, another shot. And I peeped through the window. And when we watched through the window, so the two boys are just coming on in their bike. And I said, see? Then they chase them already. And they just shoot after them like crazy. Pow, 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 like crazy. And one of the boys come this way, and the next one take the other way. And the boy, one of them, well, drop down and get in the yard, and that's where they catch him and then beat him up to put him in the pickup. The same policeman where they do the shoot up, he just come on the road and fire crazy all over, straight down. You know people interfere, so they come out and watch, so you say, get in the yard. When we say two police vehicles come at speed, full with all the PSU people or whatever they are, and well, we're afraid now. And they got straight to the house, that the old man house. And we saw banging and, like whap something. And then we hear shots and people they ball and that are quarreling and that. And well, we can't do nothing because, and then well, we took a video of them. And
Were these guys trying to resist arrest? Were they fighting? Were they did anyone pull a weapon at the police from what you were able to see?
No, ma'am, I didn't see anything else from that. We are still wondering why they came to the house when they already arrested the two that were on the street.
Police officers were reportedly out that night to enforce the SOE's curfew. According to the tenants at Don Chindo's apartments, police informed them that they were looking for persons who had violated the curfew and ran onto the property. While police have a tough job policing the street during this time, their use of what is deemed excessive force is an abuse of their power. Many have questioned whether the officers took Minister of National Security Michael Perafit's words on Thursday as grounds to behave in this quote-unquote senseless manner.
So we feel no guilt when we say between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. the security forces don't got no sense. Between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. the security forces will have all the sense in the world. Between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m., you know, got no sense.
If them kids broke the law, they're not kids anymore, they're seniors, olders already over 18. It's really good, but make the law come, lock them up, charge them, because that's why they have the judges and whatsoever, because they're going to press charges and whatsoever. But even though that's not the reason to come over and lash. You see the video, they lash them up like they're animals. Even animal doesn't deserve to get beat like that, and the way how they beat the guy's house, right?
Commissioner of Police Chester Williams says there is an internal investigation into this matter because of the beatdown of the 77-year-old man.
One of the video that really disturbed me is the one involving the elderly man. And now for me, that I cannot condone. And I have directed Professional Standard Branch to investigate that matter. And I should be getting a report from them by the end of the day today. And once that is received, then I'll be giving direction as to how we proceed.
Reporting for News 5, I'm Andrea Polanco.
Another police officer is under scrutiny, this time for a traffic accident on Sunday in Dangrega, which resulted in the death of Giovanni Villafranco. It happened at around 5:40 p.m. on George Price Drive, where investigators saw a motorcycle and two persons on the roadside. The persons were identified as Villafranco and Jahid Johnson. Both students of the new site area were on a motorcycle when they were hit by a Toyota 4Runner, which was being driven at the time by police officer Elton Eligio. The official police report says that Villafranco collided into the passenger side of the SUV. Johnson's family says, however, that it was the officer who crashed into the duo.
Jahid is recovering. He's suffering from a broken wrist, head injury, and his jaw is swollen, so he cannot speak at this moment. Well, about 5:30 yesterday evening, one of my family members received a call from her friend stating that Jahid got into an accident. He was on a motorcycle with one of our neighborhood friends. We are told that a police officer drove up into them, and this police officer was under the influence. According to sources, this police officer had friends around him, and they took him away from the scene. So he did not help the two young men who was on the ground at that time. They took him and do whatever they wanted to do. We are also told that this police officer refused to take blood tests to see if he was under the influence. So I want the police to do a thorough investigation and speak with the family. Jackie live with us, and we haven't seen any police officers stop by today.
The full force of the law is coming down on persons who violate the measures of the state of emergency. Countrywide, more than 400 persons have been arrested and charged. They could face up to $5,000 each in fines. In Belize City this morning, these persons showed up to court for arraignment. They gathered in front of the magistrate court building, generally observing the 6-foot social distancing guidelines. Some say, however, they were caught in the wide net cast to contain COVID-19. Here is News 5's Dwayne Moody with this report.
Over the weekend alone, over 328 persons, I think to be exact, were charged. On Thursday night, bringing Friday, a total of 78 were charged. So overall, we have charged over 400 persons.
Over 400 persons have been picked up and charged since April 2nd, when a nationwide state of emergency was declared in Belize. A curfew between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. was instituted that gave the police department the power to charge those who are caught on the streets between those hours without a pass signed by the Minister of National Security. The draconian measure was put in place to help with preventing the spread of the deadly COVID-19 virus, for which Belize has already recorded its first death.
Officers must exercise discretion, especially in terms of persons who are moving around during the non-curfew hours. But while, yes, they need to exercise discretion, I have said to them, I do not want too much discretion to be exercised, because at the end of the day, if it is that we exercise too much discretion, then it will create that too many people are out on the streets, and the more people we have on the street, the greater the potential for the virus to be spread.
Today, outside the courthouse in Belize City, scores of residents stood waiting for their names to be called while adhering to social distancing guidelines. They were all picked up and charged within the last 4 days and slapped with one of 9 charges under the law, including breach of curfew, unable to provide reason for movement outside curfew period, approved business operating outside specified time, or keeping business open when required to be closed, failing to practice social distancing, failing to abide by social distancing protocols, and hosting or attending a social event in breach of emergency. But Heather Foreman says that on Saturday evening, even before the curfew was in place, she received an emergency call from her mother and went to visit her a few blocks away on Mayflower Street. By the time she returned to her yard, a female police officer approached her and told her that she was going to be charged for violating the law.
I gave an emergency call on Saturday evening at 5:20 p.m. from my mom because she's a sick patient with cancer and thing. So I gone to see what the situation with my mom. Upon that, no policeman never stopped me or asked me what are the reason why I did up on the street. Upon reaching my mom's house, don't reach the house, I come out back for go home where I live there, Lakeview Street. Still not gonna know what that the problem for the police mobile gun. Then they come on a speed from 123rd neighborhood into Lakeview Street there. Upon reaching my yard, the doubler just jump out and tell me get in on the mobile. They don't have one reason why they tell me to get in on the mobile. For when I get in on the mobile, now they carry me to the substation for Vernon Street. And one of the male right down there, where I don't pass and come home. He get in on the mobile and he gave me at the station now. Euphrates Avenue. And he read out to me that he charge me for not have one reason why I open the street. Finding out that I get charged for curfew. If they said that curfew, the hours at 8 p.m., why they still pick up people early and they charge people for curfew?
Compel Chester Williams says that some residents seemingly have no regard for the health of others when they fail to comply with the state of emergency and curfew.
We continue to see defiance on the part of some Belizeans who seemingly are just downright hard-headed and just don't want to adhere to the regulations that have been put in place or the measures. And as a police department, we have a responsibility to ensure that we do what must be done with a view to ensure that the end state of the state of emergency is achieved, which is to minimize or to stop the spreading of this deadly virus.
Wait, Moody for News 5.
Commissioner of Police Chester Williams also told News 5 that infected COVID-19 persons who fail to comply with quarantine directives can be charged for negligent behavior if they do not adhere to self-isolation and quarantine guidelines imposed by the quarantine authority. Last week, prior to the complete closure of entry points, a mandatory quarantine for 14 days had to be instituted on Belizeans returning to the country. Regulation 15 of the Emergency Powers of Regulation 2020 is the section used to investigate these suspect cases of violations by COVID-19 patients.
We were looking at 2 cases in particular where we believe that persons may have violated the curfew requirement, the quarantine requirements. And it will take some time because we don't want to approach those persons at this time until after we know that they have undergone the quarantine requirements and are certified safe. So those matters will be further investigated when the Ministry of Health have given the all clear. That investigation is still ongoing. I'm not going to say exactly which are the 2 cases, but that is indeed a case that we're looking at to see if in fact she had received directives from the quarantine officers to quarantine, and then we'll be looking to see whether or not she violated those requirements. And so we're looking at her case as well.
Earlier in the newscast, we had details on the COVID-19 patients. Belize confirmed its 3rd case of the novel coronavirus on March 29th. As it relates to patient 3, he is a 38-year-old Belizean who returned to Belize from New York. He started to show minor signs and symptoms on March 25th, after which he had visited a health facility for treatment. Patient 3 remains in self-isolation, and today he called into the morning show circuit to share that he is not showing any more signs or symptoms of the virus.
Concerning health-wise and things are very good. I'll tell you no lie, very good. No symptoms, no cough, no cold, no fever, nothing. Some very weird, right? But I'll be honest with you, I'm really safe. Right? Come home, I come isolate. But actually, you know, try to isolate. I want to lady, so I can give a test. A lot of people don't know this, the people who spread the rumor. I have 8 big crumb up on my house. I tell the police, anytime they could come and check my camera, see if I can anyway. I want to arrest them people who make them false accusations. The worst thing about this is that if they say you have it, I tell Belizeans right now, be prepared for the mental part of it. You know why I started? Early one morning, I drink some ice cold Gatorade and it just itched my throat. So I had a least slightly cough, and I said, man, make I still go do a test because I started that isolation. Me gone, I no got no fever, no cough, nothing when I gone, no sharpness of breath, nothing. Right? And up to now, I have nothing. But they say I have this virus, and I stay isolated. I still isolated. I still am in quarantine. Despite all the rumors that are out there right now, just that I sound very good. And nothing at all, nothing. I get up, I do my exercise every morning, you know. I still even technically drink because, man, people give me, you know, they help, they tell me, they're glad that I do because nobody will get in contact with me come back positive with it. By the time I get off of the plane, the nurse will meet, the immigration officer, the custom officer, the duty-free spot, nobody gets positive cause of me.
After the break, 2 bus lines are back on the road, and the Prime Minister assures health personnel that their concerns will be met.
Have you tried Fertina lately?
On Saturday afternoon, the news of the countrywide suspension of bus service took off like wildfire online. That's because there was an announcement made by the Belize Bus Association. The decision, according to President Thomas Shaw, was taken unanimously by its members following the closure of the terminals on Saturday morning. The bus operators, according to the BBA, weren't happy that they weren't informed that the terminal staff had called in sick. That was the last straw, according to President Shaw, because buses were already operating at a loss with the reduced number of passengers traveling. Here's how he explained that decision on Saturday.
The terminals were closed. They were not allowing the buses to go into the terminal. And then we hear about social distancing. People are out there, the police are moving them. And I called the minister, and he said that, well, all the workers called in sick this morning. Well, if that was the case, I think that we should have been informed, or myself, so that I can inform my operators. As it is, for the past 2 weeks, they have been out there. Even though we staggered the run, it still wasn't really working out because most operators were not even covering for the fuel. But we still stood out there to show support because we can't really punish the commuters. People are still traveling. But after a consultation, this all came about when we consulted. After the terminals decided closed, we held a meeting and we consulted with our operators, and this is a unanimous decision. It wasn't about one person or by myself. All the operators decided, well, effective tomorrow, we'd cease all operation countrywide.
Is this unprecedented? Is this the first time you're seeing something or experiencing something like this? I know you've been in the bus industry for a very long time.
It's the very, very first. I know it gets hard, but it has never, ever get to this point. I mean, the Bible tells you about this. This is like famine already because people are hungry. The conductors are calling, some are getting 1 day per week. There's no way they can suffice their family with that.
So the decision was a suspension of bus service countrywide, which was to go into effect on Sunday. But a few hours later, James Bus Line and West Line issued notices that they were keeping their buses on the road. A few other bus operators are operating on a limited schedule out of the north. But that suspension, as was shared by President Thomas Shaw of the BBA, wasn't meant to last for the duration of the state of emergency. Shaw said if bus lines are able to access some of the relief funds, they would be able to get back on the road. Here's how he explains it.
All operators, everybody is suffering, and everybody is suffering right now. And if we can get some sort of relief with the fuel, I mean, my operators are willing to go back to normal, but they don't want to be running and then we're living on promises, and at the end of the day, you have already exhausted all your funds and you're not getting it back, because this is what is taking place.
Expecting some kind of help. Is there anything forthcoming on that matter?
Well, we're not sure because it's going on 2 weeks now. We haven't heard anything, and we put our operational call, but it didn't necessarily mean to say what we put out there is what we actually wanted. But we put our operational calls out there to let them see what we're going through. And as I said, if they could meet us halfway with the fuel, whatever, I mean, at this point in time, you're operating, and as for myself, I can tell you that for the past 2 weeks, I've lost tremendously.
What would the government need to say to you today or show to you, maybe in writing, to get those buses back on the road?
Well, so far, if it could be via a phone call, it could be maybe a meeting on Monday, just assuring we come up with a skeleton schedule and assuring the operators that are presently out there that this is what GOB will be doing. They would be more than happy to go out there.
This afternoon, the Nurses Association of Belize sounded an alarm, saying there is lack of material and equipment to deal with an outbreak of COVID-19. NAB says it has concluded a nationwide tour and sent a report to the Deputy Director of Health Services and the Chief Nursing Officer on March 26th. The list includes 6 areas that the Nurses Association believes should be provided to protect the health personnel. These include things like personal protective equipment for personnel in designated COVID-19 areas and proper payout of allowances to frontline staff. President of the association, Darrell Spencer, is urging the Ministry of Health to take action.
The transportation section is almost to a halt. So nurses, doctors, the entire hospital staff find it difficult to reach to work. Not all of us have our own means of transportation. So we would like the ministry to step up and assist in this point. We need to get to work. If you want us to come to work, we are ready, willing, and able to come to work, but there are some limits when it comes to transportation. Some persons do not have the facility to isolate, so we would like the ministry's help. This is why we had requested an allowance for all the staff so that they can use this money to source another place of residence, get a babysitter, or whatever their challenge might be to get them separated from their family. It is already hard enough that we have to isolate from our family, so we are protecting them in that way, but then we are incurring expenses. We've touched where it comes to the protective gear the staff is given. The ones given, some of them are not of good quality, and even that being the case, we still have exposures of staff in different areas where we feel that the staff should be completely covered. We sent another email to the ministry again this morning requesting urgent audience. And how you know it that as soon as a press release is threatened, an emergency meeting sent. So we have a meeting with them tomorrow morning.
Responding to the concerns of the Nurses Association of Belize was Prime Minister Dean Barrow today during a live video statement. Barrow says that the association's concerns will be addressed, including the need for PPEs and heavy-duty tents from the Belize Defense Force and elsewhere.
We do have absolutely a sufficiency of PPEs, so no frontline worker need go without a PPE. I saw one other thing where the nurses complain that the areas, I believe they're talking about KHMH. I don't know that it is the same throughout the country, but concentrating on KHMH for the moment, that there are tents being used and that these tents are not, in their view, safe enough, and they want permanent shelters. Well, that will take a while to construct, but if, as I heard, the tents that are currently being used are too flimsy, then while we're trying to construct, we will get heavy-duty tents from the Belize Defense Force and elsewhere. I give you my word that the difficulties you're having, government is not only disposed, we have given instructions via the NOC this morning to the team that is in charge to ensure that we sort out the difficulties, that we take care of the concerns. We hear you, and we not only hear you, we will address your difficulties.
When we come back, behind bars, inmates step up with the production of face masks. The Belize Central Prison is bursting at its seams with a number of inmates behind bars. The recent arrests as the state of emergency offenders have swollen the number to about 1,150. There are no known inmates infected with the coronavirus, but the facility is getting ready for the likelihood that when there is a positive case, the virus will spread rapidly. So the inmates have found a way to produce masks, and they are bringing them out as fast as they can for the prison population as well as for those private organizations. Here's News 5's Isani Caetano with this report.
From the confines of the Belize Central Prison, face masks are being churned out at a rate of several hundred per day. Since last Wednesday, a team of 15 inmates has been working diligently in a manufacturing line that sees them all cutting, sewing, and finalizing handmade protective face covering.
We saw the need for masks because we ourselves never had any. We run low, and we saw it as an opportunity to start making them. So we got a model, and I think we did a YouTube, and we saw how it was being manufactured by other entities, and we thought that we have the human resource, the manpower to do so why not jump on the bandwagon and start making?
And supplying the prison staff with these reusable masks was the first order of business for the Colby Foundation once it began making them in large volumes. Aside from these personal items, the prison has seriously stepped up its own security protocols in anticipation of a possible COVID-19 case behind its walls.
We have added some additional precautions. Remember 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, we had started by the rigid hand washing, and then we opted to the screening later on. And then since Friday, we've increased our vigilance in terms of sterilizing or sanitizing these areas that are being touched constantly by inmates and staff, particularly the area that inmates are being searched. Inmates and staff are being searched. We've started to sanitize vehicles entering the prison as well, because they could very well have the virus on their tires and underneath, or even on the body of the vehicle. So we're spraying that. I think you saw that when you came in just a while ago.
Beyond the fumigation of vehicles entering the facility, all persons are required to wash their hands upon entry, prior to a mandatory screening process. It's part of the prison's recent Take No Chance policy.
We have ramped up the screening, the COVID screening, testing for fevers or abnormal temperature, I should say, and the whole screening process to try and ascertain whether a person is likely to have contracted the COVID-19 virus.
You have designated an area of the prison to be used for isolation purposes. Can you speak to that?
Yes, we have. That's an additional measure. We've put that into full use since Friday. So every new admission that comes to the prison, after they are thoroughly screened and sanitized, if that is the case, they are placed in that area so that the doctor can monitor them and see if over time they are displaying any symptoms at all.
Back on the production row, these tailors are busy sewing while their fellow teammates handle other aspects of the assembly.
We have produced almost 4,000 masks since we started this operation last week, and we have sold some to the police and to other private entities on the outside, all of them being done through Rotary Club of Belize, because you know we have that partnership with Rotary. As a matter of fact, Colby is Rotary.
Supplying the outside world is one thing, but preparing the Belize Central Prison for a coronavirus eventuality is quite another. So, how ready is the facility for such an outcome?
The prison is a society, just like any other society, and I believe it's just a matter of when. We are doing our utmost, but like you know, no man is an island, so whatever measures we have instituted, I will tell you though, is geared towards preventing it altogether. As a matter of fact, I feel very good that we had started our partial lockdown, I think at least 2 weeks before the first case was discovered in Belize. So I think that gives us, a little edge there, because at least what we know so far is that whatever we have in here, whomever we have in here since Friday, we know that they're COVID-19 free.
Reporting for News 5, I am Isana Cayetano.
Over the weekend, there was a fire on T Street in the south side of Belize City. The blaze consumed a concrete bungalow house that was not occupied for about 3 weeks. According to residents, no one was inside the house when the fire broke, but the blaze quickly spread to destroy the structure. Robert Lahudi lives just behind the property and says that he rushed home to extricate his stepchildren who were inside their house.
They tell me, say, Boogie, he say, your house, your yard on fire. And I run, all we run come, right? And when we get here, so now, I say, big smoke. So I say, well, they picnic there in there. So they holla, I say, Boogie, get your picnic there out. But I try to get there out, we gone through the fence there, so because this done the pan blaze, right? And then after that, then Bali then tell me, chop the wire then, because the fire done, they come to my house now on the line. This thing, I'll bust. I tell you, frighten me, I never think here, things solo. Anyway, I get them out and carry them through the fence. And then, after that, the fire up department come.
How many persons were inside the house?
2 persons, my 2 stepchildren. When they in the house, nobody was there. No, it was, look, when the fireman come, the house was completely locked up. So I don't know how the fire start inside, you know. So, but I had to take care of my children.
Investigation is currently underway to determine the cause of the fire. Coming up after the break, an update on recent homicides in Corozal, Ladyville, and Punta Gorda.
perspective.
There were 3 fatal shootings over the course of 4 days last week, 2 of which have been recorded as murders. The most recent occurred on the night of April 2nd in southern Belize in the Indianville community of Punta Gorda. News 5 has confirmed that 2 persons have been detained for questioning in the murder of Ismail Jacobs. Around 7 p.m. that night, Jacobs was discovered dead in the living room of his house with multiple gunshot wounds. Reports are that he was socializing with a group of persons when a gunman entered the front door and ended his life. Today, Compol Chester Williams told News 5 that a motive for this murder is yet to be ascertained.
The one in Punta Gorda, 2 persons are currently in custody who we believe are the ones responsible. Investigators are interviewing them at this time with a view to see how far they're going to get with it.
In the murder of Haitian national Raymond Cheristal, the motive seems to be robbery. Commissioner Williams says that an ongoing investigation has not led to any arrests. The former cab driver was found murdered on the doorsteps of his Ladyville residence on the morning of April 2nd. Cheristal was shot to the head.
For the matter in Ladyville, the investigators have been on it. And they have not been able to make any significant progress. Those 2 incidents, one in Ladyville we believe was robbery was the motive, and the one in Punta Gorda we have not been able to ascertain a true motive, but investigators continue to work on it.
Commissioner Chester Williams also gave an update on the shooting death of Rafael Sensores in Corozal. The Chula Vista resident was with friends at a house he frequented in the White Cocal area of that northern town when a pellet gun they were playing with discharged. Sensores was hit to the chest and died hours later at the Northern Regional Hospital in Orange Walk. Compol Williams officially confirms that the fatal shooting was accidental.
The matter in Corozal obviously was a really sad case. 3 friends playing with a pellet gun, and one ended up shooting the other, causing fatal injuries.
The Compol also told News 5 that even though COVID-19 is a priority, his officers remain on the ground to deal with criminal activity. And that's the news. Don't forget that tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/News5Live. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us, and from all of us here at News 5, please remember to wash your hands, keep your social distance, and stay home. Good night.